Open your legs and let me see. The lonely cowboy told the giant woman he would marry. It was Christmas night. But his real reason was to show she was still good, even with the bad talk. Open your legs and let me see. The words stayed in the warm room. It was Christmas night in 1884. Elias Thorne, a lonely cowboy who lost his wife 3 years ago, went on his knees. He was in front of the chair where his giant woman bride sat scared in her simple white dress. Clara Vance was very tall, over 6 feet. She had wide shoulders and strong hands. She had cared for children back east. She looked down at this smaller man who brought her across 1,000 miles of cold land. Her dark eyes were full of fear. This fear comes from being turned away many times. The Christmas tree was bright behind them with soft light. Its pine branches had red ribbons and hope. Outside the window, snow fell on the dark town. The town, Iron Creek, said bad things about her. They said this giant woman was with men in the city. They said she was spoiled. No good cowboy should marry a woman like that. But this lonely cowboy was not looking at her like a horse at a sale. He was not making fun of her height or her large size. His rough hands touched her knee gently as he knelt on the hard floor. His old face looked up at hers with great respect. His voice cracked when he said those shocking words. Clara held her dress tight. She sat in the wooden chair by the bright tree. Her body was stiff. She thought this moment would end like all the others, with hate, with her being sent away, with another door closing. But the lonely cowboy's real reason was not what she thought. He was not trying to prove the bad stories were true. He was putting his good name at risk to show she was still pure. He wanted to save her from the churchmen's public checkup the next day. He wanted to protect the woman whose letters, for 6 months, made him love a spirit he had never met. His soft hand stayed on her leg on that cold Christmas night. The firelight danced on their faces. The town was getting ready to hurt them both the next morning. One big question burned between them. Why would a lonely cowboy who was so much shorter than her stand up for a giant woman the whole world hated? And the secret truth neither could say out loud. What if his checkup showed she was innocent, but ruined the small trust that was just starting to grow between two hurt people who were both told they were not worthy of love? The horse carriage came just 2 hours earlier. It shook through the streets covered in white. It carried mail, goods, and one very tall woman who made everyone look. Clara stepped down from the carriage. She knew what would happen next. It always happened the same way. First, people stared. Then, they whispered. Then, the man who sent for her would see her height, her big body, and he would quickly remember a needed trip to the next town. She saw this happen in 3 different towns before this one. 3 different men wrote nice letters about wanting a strong woman, a capable woman, a woman who could handle life on the frontier. But when they saw how big, strong really looked on a woman, when they had to stand next to her and feel small, every single one found a reason to send her back. So when Elias Thorne walked through the crowd at the train station, when she looked down at this man who barely reached her chin, she had already started planning which train would take her back east. She started writing the letter to the children's home, begging for her job back, even though there was no job. The bad story made sure she would never work with children again. But Elias did not run. He looked up at her with eyes the color of the river after rain. He said 4 words that made her heart ache. "Hello, Clara. Welcome home." He did not say, "You are taller than I thought," or "This is a mistake." He just said, "Welcome home," like she belonged somewhere for the first time in her 29 years. He helped her into his wagon. His hands were careful on her arm, even though she could easily lift him up. He covered her lap with a thick wool blanket that smelled like horses and dry grass and something else, something like safety. He drove her through town while every store owner and housewife stared from their windows. The stableman shouted something mean that made Elias's face get tight. The whole world watched this odd couple and judged them before they even talked much. The cabin was 3 miles outside town, next to some pine trees. Smoke curled from the chimney like a promise. Elias had decorated for her. That is what hurt her heart first. Not his words or his kind eyes, but the green branches over the door, the wreath hanging on the wood door, the way he clearly tried to make this single man's place feel like a house. When she walked inside and saw the Christmas tree by the window with popcorn and ribbons on its branches, she had to turn away so he would not see her tears. No one had decorated for her since her mother died 5 years ago. No one had cared enough to try. "I made dinner," Elias said, hanging his hat on a hook by the door. "Nothing special, just meat soup and bread, but you must be hungry after that long trip." She was hungry, very hungry, in fact. She was too nervous to eat since leaving the city, but she could not speak. She just nodded and let him guide her to the table. This small man moved around her like she was something valuable instead of something too big and unwanted. The soup was very good. He added spices that reminded her of her mother's cooking. The bread was warm and soft. They tasted like someone truly cared about making them right. They ate in quiet for a few minutes. The only sounds were the fire and the wind pushing snow against the windows. Then Elias put down his spoon and looked at her. Her stomach dropped. "I need to tell you something, and you will not like it," he said. Here it comes, Clara thought, the real reason he brought her all this way, the rule she would have to follow, the impossible thing she failed to do. "The carriage driver knew you," Elias continued, his voice tight with anger. "He was in the city last year for work. He saw the wanted papers, the ones that man's family put up after you said no to their son." Clara's hand stopped near her mouth. The bread crumbled in her fingers. "He told everyone in town that you were a bad woman, that you met men for money back east, that any man who marries you is getting used goods." The room walls seemed to move closer. Clara could not breathe. She thought, foolishly, that she could outrun those lies, that 1,000 miles was enough space, but shame traveled faster than any train. "I understand," she managed to whisper. "I will leave on the morning carriage." "You don't have to." "The town leaders had a fast meeting this afternoon," Elias stopped her. "While I was driving you home, they made a rule." He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket and flattened it on the table. Clara could not read the legal words, but she saw words like moral character and physical check and cancel marriage. Her eyes blurred. "They want Dr. Whitmore to check you tomorrow morning," Elias said, his voice shaking. "Before the wedding, in front of people from the council, to prove that you haven't—" He could not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Clara knew exactly what they wanted to do to her. These religious men in their church clothes wanted to spread her legs in a cold room and poke at her body like she was a horse being sold. They wanted to prove she was good in front of an audience, because a woman's word, especially an accused woman's word, meant nothing. "I will not do it," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I will not let them shame me like that. I would rather die alone than give them that win." Elias's hand shot across the table, covering hers. His palm was warm and rough and surprisingly gentle. "You won't have to," he said, "because we are getting married tonight, right now, and I will be the one to check you." Clara pulled her hand back like she was burned. "What?" "If you're already my wife when they come tomorrow, the law protects you. They cannot force a married woman to be checked against her husband's wishes." "But they will ask me if I check your goodness before the wedding." His eyes locked onto hers. "I need to be able to look them in the eye and tell them the truth, that you came to me pure, that all their rumors are lies, that they can take their rule and burn it." The room spun. Clara held the table to keep from falling. "You want to check me yourself?" "I want to protect you from something far worse." Elias stood, moved around the table, but kept his distance. "Dr. Whitmore has hands like ice and a cold heart. He will make it hurt, Clara, not because he has to, but because he enjoys making women feel small." He swallowed hard. "I will not enjoy it. I will hate every second of knowing I am doing this. But I will be gentle. I will be quick. And I'll do it here, in private, with only the Christmas tree and God as witnesses, instead of a room full of men who want to see you broken." Clara stared at this man she had known for less than 3 hours, this lonely cowboy who decorated his cabin with pine branches and baked bread, and now he was offering to do something bad to save her from something terrible. Part of her wanted to run, wanted to grab her bag and walk out into the snow, keep walking until the cold killed her, or she reached a place where people did not care about goodness and reputation and whether a woman's body met their rules. But another part of her, the part that survived false stories and family hate and 3 failed tries at starting fresh, that part whispered that maybe this man was different. Maybe his hands would be as gentle as his eyes suggested. Maybe his true reason really was to protect her, not to own her. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "You do not even know me. Why would you risk your good name to defend mine?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. Outside, church bells started to ring for the Christmas Eve service. Their sound reminded her that in town, families were gathering for songs and hot drinks, and the kind of belonging Clara had forgotten existed. "Because your letters saved my life," he finally said. 3 years ago, my wife Sarah died having a baby. The baby, too. I spent the next 2 years wishing I had died with them." He moved to the window, stared at the falling snow. "Then your first letter came. You wrote about the little girl at the children's home who would not talk, about how you sang her to sleep every night until she found her voice again. And I thought if someone that kind exists, maybe it is worth staying alive." He turned back to her, and his eyes were wet. "So yes, I would risk my name. I would risk everything, because you already saved me once, and you did not even know you were doing it." The Christmas tree lights blurred through Clara's tears. 6 months of letters felt like a lifeline when she was sinking in shame. She poured her heart into those pages, never thinking that someone was reading them and finding reasons to keep living. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Every man I have ever known has found a reason to reject me. My height, my strength, my refusal to pretend I am something I am not. What if you check me and find some fault, some reason to change your mind?" Elias crossed the room, stopped just close enough that she could smell wood smoke and leather and honest sweat. "Then I will love you anyway," he said simply, "because I am not looking for perfect Clara. I am looking for real." He held out his hand, small and scarred and steady. "So I am asking, will you let me prove to the world that you are exactly what you say you are? Will you trust me enough to be vulnerable just this once, so I can protect you from men who will hurt you every day for the rest of your life if we do not stop them now?" Clara looked at his hand, then at the Christmas tree glowing softly, then at the door that led back to the snow and the carriage and the endless running. She thought about the children she left behind, about the little girl named Lily who learned to speak again because someone was patient and gentle and refused to give up. She thought about her mother braiding her hair, whispering that being different was not the same as being wrong. And she thought about this lonely cowboy who lost everything and still had enough heart left to fight for a woman he only just met. Clara took his hand. It was smaller than hers, rougher, warmer than she expected. "Yes," she whispered. The word felt like stepping off a cliff, hoping someone would catch her. Elias let out a breath like he had been holding it for hours. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "I promise I will make this as bearable as I can." He guided her toward the Christmas tree. Clara realized he planned this to make the moment less cold. The Christmas candles cast soft shadows. The fire cracked warmly. Outside the window, snow fell like the whole world was holding its breath. "Tell me about the children's home," Elias said, as his hands moved to the top button of her dress. Clara's breath caught. "What?" "Tell me about Lily, the little girl who would not talk." His fingers were steady on the second button, but his eyes never left her face. "I need you to remember who you are while I do this, not a body being checked, a woman with stories that matter." Her hands shook as she held the chair arms. "She was 5 years old, found on the streets with no memory of family. The other caretakers thought she was simple, but I knew better." Button 3, button 4. His movements were slow, giving her every chance to stop him. "How did you know?" "Because she watched everything. Her eyes followed talks. Even when she did not speak, she understood. She just didn't trust the world enough to use words." Elias pushed the dress off her shoulders. Clara's chest tightened with shame and fear. But he was still looking at her face, still listening like her story mattered more than her body. "What did you do?" "I sang to her every night for 2 months, the songs my mother taught me." The dress fell at her feet, leaving her in just her thin slip. Clara wanted to cover herself, wanted to disappear, but Elias's steady gaze kept her grounded. And one morning I woke up to find her standing by my bed, humming the tune. She started talking that same day. "You gave her back her voice." Elias knelt before her chair, his position respectful. "That is who you are, Clara. That is what I see when I look at you." His hands rested on her knees outside her slip, warm and grounding. Not a woman who needs to prove anything, a woman who has already proven everything important. The Christmas tree lights flickered. Church bells rang again. Clara realized that for the first time, a man was kneeling before her, not to make her feel small, but to lift her up. "I'm going to check you now," Elias said gently. "Tell me if you need me to stop. Any moment, any reason. Your word is enough." She nodded, unable to speak past the tears. As his hands moved with careful respect, as he spoke softly through every moment, Clara understood that this lonely cowboy was giving her something she never had before. Not just protection, not just belief, but the kind of gentleness that proved love could exist even in the hardest moments, even when the world demanded proof instead of faith. His hands trembled as he lifted the hem of her slip. Clara saw tears on his old face. "I am sorry," he whispered. "God forgive me. I am so sorry you have to go through this." But his touch was light, professional, yet somehow kind. He kept talking to keep her focused. "There is a scar on your leg. How did you get it?" "Climbing a tree," I managed. "I was 12. A kitten was stuck in the branches, crying for its mother." "Of course there was." A broken laugh escaped him. "Of course you risked yourself to save something helpless." His check was fast, complete, and so careful, she could not believe this was the same thing the council planned to do in front of people. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, but blazing with something fierce. "You are untouched, completely pure. Every bad lie they told about you, every single word, it is all false." He lowered her slip with shaking hands, helped her back into her dress with the same gentle care. "And now I can stand before them tomorrow and tell the truth." Clara's whole body was shaking. Relief and shame and thanks crashed through her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for making it bearable." "Don't thank me for being decent." Elias stood, wiped his eyes roughly. "Thank me after we are married and safe from their cruelty." He grabbed his coat. "Pastor Williams agreed to marry us tonight. Midnight ceremony, just us and him and God. By morning, you will be Mrs. Thorne, and the law will protect what those men cannot touch." As they got ready to leave for the church, as Elias helped her with her coat, Clara saw something that made her blood run cold. Riders approaching through the snow. 5 men carrying torches that cut through the darkness like accusations. "Stay inside," Elias ordered, his voice hard as iron. "Whatever happens, stay inside and lock the door." The riders stopped in front of the cabin. Clara knew the man in front, Mayor Sterling, the bank owner. Judge Morrison, his brother-in-law, was beside him, along with Dr. Whitmore and 2 other council members. "Evening, Thorne," the mayor called out, his voice falsely nice. "Heard you collected quite a package today." Elias stepped off the porch, placing himself between the men in his cabin. "My fiancée arrived safely, if that is what you were asking." "Fiancé," the judge spit the word like it tasted rotten. "That is a generous word for a woman with her reputation." Through the window, Clara watched Elias stand tall. "Miss Vance's reputation is clean. Any rumors you have heard are lies spread by a family back east who could not handle her rejecting their son." "Interesting idea," Dr. Whitmore drawled, "but the council voted. Any woman of questionable virtue must be checked before marriage. We're here to get her." "Like hell you are." The mayor's horse moved nervously. "You are defying a legal rule, Thorne. That is a serious matter." Elias did not flinch. "What is serious is 5 men riding out on Christmas Eve to terrorize a woman who has done nothing wrong except be tall and survive false accusations." His voice dropped dangerously. "You want to check her? You will have to go through me first." Judge Morrison leaned forward, his face full of hate. "We can have the sheriff arrest you for blocking the law. Then we will check her anyway, and you will watch from a jail cell." "Try it." Elias's hand moved to his hip, pointing to his gun. "See how that plays with the good folks in this town when they hear you arrested a man for protecting his bride on Christmas Eve." The standoff was tense. Clara's heart pounded. This lonely cowboy who barely reached her shoulder was standing against 5 powerful men who could destroy his life. He stood there because he promised to protect her. 6 months of letters taught him that her soul was worth defending, even if the world hated her body. Then a new voice cut through the darkness. "What in God's name is happening here?" Pastor Williams emerged from the snow on his horse, his white collar visible. Behind him rode 3 more people, Mrs. Chen from the store, old Samuel the blacksmith, and surprisingly, the sheriff himself. "These men are enforcing a council rule," Mayor Sterling said, his voice losing certainty. "A rule passed in secret this afternoon," Pastor Williams said coldly, "without proper notice or public comment. I checked with the county clerk. It is not legally binding." The mayor's face darkened. "The moral character of our town is measured by how we treat the most vulnerable among us, not by how viciously we tear down a woman based on rumors." He turned to Elias. "I came to tell you the ceremony is ready, though it seems we have uninvited guests." Sheriff Pike cleared his throat. "Mayor Sterling, Judge Morrison, I suggest you gentlemen head home. You are trespassing on private property, and I do not recall seeing any warrant." For a long moment, Clara thought the mayor would fight more, but Mrs. Chen spoke up, her voice sharp. "My husband and I rode here to witness this wedding. So did Samuel. So did half a dozen other folks waiting at the church. Word spread about what you plan to do to this woman, and decent people don't stand for it." The mayor looked around, seeing his power crumble. "This isn't over, Thorne," he finally spat. "We will see about this marriage." "Yes, you will," Elias said calmly. "You will see it every Sunday when my wife and I sit in church. You will see it every time we come to town. And you will have to live with knowing you tried to destroy an innocent woman and failed." The riders turned and disappeared into the snow, their torches fading. Clara burst from the cabin, running to Elias. When she reached him, she did not care that she was taller or that people were watching. She wrapped her arms around this brave, gentle man who risked everything for her. "You stood up to them," she whispered against his shoulder. "You actually stood up to them." "I told you I would." His arms came around her waist, steady and sure. "I told you, after tonight, anyone who questions you questions me." They married at midnight in a small church filled with people Clara had never met, people who heard about the council's cruelty and decided to witness something better. When Elias slipped a simple gold ring on her finger and kissed her for the first time, she tasted salt from both their tears. When they returned to the cabin as husband and wife, as the Christmas dawn broke pink and gold over the Montana mountains, Clara Thorne realized she finally found what she was searching for. Not a place where her size did not matter, but a person who saw past her body to the heart underneath. A person who valued her gentleness as much as her strength. a person who proved that real love was not about meeting standards, it was about standing together when the whole world demanded you stand apart. Elias pulled her close by the Christmas tree, this giant woman bride and her lonely cowboy, two odd people who found each other across 1,000 miles of faith and letters and desperate hope. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Thorne," he whispered. "Merry Christmas," she whispered back, and for the first time in her life, Clara believed that she was finally, truly home. So, here's a question for you watching. Have you ever been judged for something you could not control, for being too much or not enough of what the world wanted? And men, would you be brave enough to stand up for someone when it cost you everything? Women, would you trust someone enough to be vulnerable after the world taught you that being vulnerable only brings pain? Drop your answers in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, hit that follow button and turn on alerts so you never miss stories about real love, real courage, and real second chances. Because sometimes the most powerful love stories are the ones where two broken people prove that together they are strong enough to face anything.